Hi guys, thanks for joining me. As you can tell, I'm not in my office. This is actually a pre-recorded video. I've had to do quite a few of these lately, and mainly just because life is happening. My husband's entering basketball season as a coach, and so he's not able to get home as fast after school. My kids have got a lot of stuff going on, and well, I'm needed to leave the clinic earlier than I typically do. But it gives me some good opportunity to relax and not feel as rushed when I'm recording things. Now, where I'm at right now recording, I'm actually in Kentucky. I took my son away for a weekend. We've been doing some kayaking and underground gorge kayaking, super cool experience. We've done a little bit of hiking. He's inside taking a break, playing some video games while I'm taking this opportunity to record this for you. Now, I just said I did a whole lot of exercise with my son earlier today. I'm going to encourage you to get out with your family. Make movement, make activity part of your lives, make it part of your vacations, take special trips with it, bond with your kids. All of that goes into life satisfaction and also helps with weight maintenance, which is some of the things we're going to talk about today. Now, just as a reminder, if you are watching locally with where I'm at, the Give and Gobble is just a very few short weeks or days away. That's the race that happens on Thanksgiving Day to support the Dixon County Help Center. If you have not signed up for that and you want to, you still can. Last minute, it's okay. You don't get a t-shirt, but it's still fine. You go to gg5k.org and sign up. That's a great family way to get out and exercise before you get into the Thanksgiving spirit and partake in that meal. So today's talk is actually going to be about the effectiveness of a low carb diet or carbohydrate restriction for acute weight loss, but also for weight maintenance. And these are things I've talked a little bit about before, but I like putting these two studies together because it really validates what we do in the clinic. This would be a great video to share with friends that may be doubtful of the effectiveness of a low carb diet, but also if you're considering starting a low carb diet and are not sure if it's right for you, I think everyone should give it a try. And if it's not right for you, okay. But for a lot of people, it's the right thing to get them that weight loss and the weight maintenance. So let's dive in. The first study we're going to be talking about was just published this year, 2023, in the BMC Medicine Journal. This is a pretty reputable medical journal. The title of it is The Effect of Dietary Carbohydrate and Calorie Restriction on Weight and Metabolic Health in Overweight and Obese Individuals, a multi-center randomized control trial. So this is strictly about the acute weight loss. This is not about the long-term weight loss. The multi-center randomized control trial, that's a big deal. This means light bulb, this is going to be good quality science because your randomized control studies are the best data we can get. That means you take a group of individuals, you put them in the random things you're trying to decide what is the best, and you get a good idea of, is this legit for real world application or not? It's the best way to weed out other confounding factors that could affect your data because you can get a whole lot of information. Now, the multi-center just means it was one study and they had multiple hubs that people could come from to participate in this study. So in this one, they compare the standard American diet or the SAD diet, because in my opinion, it helps like nobody. It also looks at a calorie controlled diet, a low carb diet, and then a low carb diet plus calorie control on it. There are 302 participants in this study, and each of those four groups has around 75 to 76 individuals in it. So each group is fairly well weighted with how many participants they have in it. There's some primary and secondary outcomes that they're looking for. The primary is a reduction in body mass index and comparing the change in body mass index. The secondary outcome is the actual change in pounds loss, as well as the body measurements, so like waist, hip circumference, things of that nature. This was a 12-week study, and I love that it's a 12-week study because our program, our first intense part of our program at DMA Weight and Wellness, is 12 weeks. And so we're encouraging people to really dive into that first 12 weeks and commit to it. So this is good stuff to actually compare to my program. The individuals in this study were 18 to 65 years of age, so they are adults, and that takes out any really, really young and also are elderly in the study. They had to have a BMI of 24 plus. And if you remember, over 24 is in the overweight category, over 30 is in the obese category. So these people had to be obese or overweight before they entered. They also removed anyone who had already known chronic conditions such as diabetes. And you may be wondering, why is it important to remove individuals that already have those chronic conditions? Well, that is because they wanted to make sure that the changes in the body weight were directly caused by the intervention and didn't have anything to do with like the diabetes improvement. Plus, those people also sometimes need a lot more instruction or monitoring than what a study like this may participate with. So let's look at the different groups. The control group, or the SAD diet, it is where you are going to have 50 to 65% carbohydrate, 30% fat, and 20% protein. So this is pretty much what the US dietary guidelines recommend. The low carb group has 26% carbohydrate, 50% fat, and 24% protein. That's pretty much a ketogenic diet. A calorie control diet, they were allowed to consume between 1,200 and 1,500 calories in a day. And they had to keep the same SAD, standard American diet, macronutrients, so a higher carb, lower fat, moderate protein diet. The low carb calorie group had all the macronutrients of the ketogenic diet or a low carb diet, plus the calorie restriction of 12 to 1,500 calories. That group was also given a meal bar. They just felt like it was going to be too restrictive to get them all of their macronutrients in real food, even though we do that every day at DMA Weight and Wellness, but they gave them one ketogenic meal bar to have as a meal replacement to keep their calories down. Participants, how do they know that they did what they were supposed to? They had to take pictures of their food, which is something we do in our first 12-week program. If you are part of our app, you take pictures of your food and the health coach rates you back. So in this, they took pictures of their food. They also kept a journal. Everyone across the 4 groups was recommended to do exercise, and they wore a fitness tracker to make sure that the exercise was pretty evenly split between the groups. And that's mainly to make sure that the exercise is not causing the weight loss, the dietary intervention is causing the weight loss. And they were advised to exercise, I believe it was 30 minutes. Yes, 30 minutes 3 times a week. So everybody was given that general recommendation. Any type of exercise they want to do, just 30 minutes 3 times a week. So naturally, in all studies, there's some dropout, and there is in this one as well. But I think the dropout rate is pretty telling. In the control group, so the standard American diet, there was a 17.3% dropout. In the calorie control group, so the only thing they were told to do is, keep your calories between 1,200 and 1,500. Actually, not the only thing, because they also had to keep the standard American diet food guide pyramid kind of macronutrients. They also had a 17.3% dropout. The low carb group, the ones that had more of a ketogenic makeup, had an 11.8% dropout, so just under 12%. And the low carb calorie restricted group had a 9.2% dropout, so under 10%. And why is that telling? Well, in weight loss studies, or in weight loss in general, if people are not seeing results, if they're doing what they're told and they're like following this strict plan and they're not getting anywhere, they're going to quit doing it. They're not going to make it to that amount. If they're overly hungry and not satisfied with what they're eating, they're going to drop out. They're not going to make it to that 12-week mark. So in here, the low carb diet, even the ones that were calorie controlled, had a much lower dropout rate than the standard American or the calorie restricted diet. And I think that is because they were seeing better weight loss and they also were feeling more satisfied with what they were eating. One side finding that I found completely gratifying was that the low carb diet, when they compared it to the standard American, so the people on the ketogenic plan versus the people eating the standard American diet, high carb, low fat, moderate protein, they naturally reduced their calories. I mean, they were told they could eat as many calories as they wanted. Eat as much as you want. You just have to fit in these percentages. Well, when they did that, they ate less calories than the people who were told you had to stay in the percentage of a higher carbohydrate. That's pretty important for weight loss. Very important for weight loss. Now, adherence, this is another one that is a big one. This means how well did they stick to the control or to the intervention that they were instructed to. In the control group, and this is going off their pictures that they took in their own journal, they had an 85% adherence. That's not bad. That's not bad. In the low calorie group, they had an 84% adherence. Not bad at all. In the low carb group, they had a 90% adherence. 90%. That's awesome. And in the low carb calorie controlled, 87% adherence. So in your carbohydrate controlled, even with calorie or without calorie, you had better adherence. They stuck to the plan more so than the standard American or a low calorie diet. What are your end results here? Because that's pretty important. The end results were, remember, the primary outcome they were looking at was a change in body mass index. In the control group, there was a drop in body mass index. It was 0.6. It was the average drop in the body mass index. In the low calorie group, so the people eating 1,200 to 1,500 calories a day, their BMI dropped by 1.3. Okay, so not quite 2 points. In the low carb, it dropped by 2.3. So a whole point more drop in body mass index. And in the low carb calorie restricted, the drop in BMI over this 12 weeks was 2.9. Side note, I see all kinds of these numbers in our weight loss program, our 12-week program. My individuals who I would say stick to that 85 to 90% adherence, kind of like the study, I actually see bigger drops in body mass index than 2.9 often. Often we can see up to 5 to 6 points dropped, depending on the adherence, also depending on the individual person and their metabolism. They also looked at other metrics. So blood sugar, total cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, total cholesterol. And there was the same amount of decrease in all 3 treatment arms. That's a good thing. So all the interventions improved the overall health of the individual. Side note there again, everybody's so scared to eat a low carb diet or to reduce their carbohydrates and increase their protein because of how it might affect their cholesterol. Well, this is yet another study that showed by and large, individuals didn't have a change in their cholesterol or it improved their cholesterol. Also, when we're looking at triglycerides, the low carb calorie restricted diet had a significantly larger drop in triglycerides than the other arms. And then one more thing that I thought was very important to point out, they measured uric acid, which is commonly elevated in someone who has gout. And for the most part, people are told to not eat red meats when they have gout, avoid cheeses. And in a calorie restricted, or not a calorie restricted, carb restricted diet, you're often eating more of those things. While in all 3 treatment arms, the low calorie, the low carb, and the low carb, low calorie had decrease in uric acid. What that means, and what I've probably told a lot of you guys, is yes, if you're eating the standard American diet, you have to avoid those things during a gout flare, or you can't over and consume them, or you're going to get a gout flare. If you are improving your insulin sensitivity, that's how well your body controls that hormone insulin, then you don't have to worry about eating those things as it pertains to gout. And this study showed that very clearly, that anytime you lost weight, you improved your insulin sensitivity and your uric acid. So when it comes to gout, you don't necessarily have to fear a flare going on any type of dietary plan more than another, because it all decreased it. I would say if you're in that transition, you need to be aware, stay very hydrated, maybe keep your anti-inflammatories around in the event that you do get a flare, because that acute transition can sometimes trigger it. But all diets can do that, not just a low carb diet. The results overall indicate that the low carb diet or the low carb arm had better weight loss and better health outcomes than the standard diet and the calorie restricted diet. So, end of the day, if you wanted your biggest bang for your buck, you're going to put yourself through some nutritional changes. You really want to lose the most weight. You want to make the most changes out of your health profile. The low carb diet outperformed yet again. So I'm going to quickly move into this next study. It's not going to take us long at all because I'm just summing up the importance of long-term carbohydrate restriction. Now, when we go into maintenance, we don't necessarily we recommend it. I stay super strict on my carbs. Not everybody does, but in maintenance, you can sometimes be a little bit more loose. Now, this study is speaking specifically to the maintenance of weight. Now, it is not a weight intervention study. It was published in 2022 in BMJ, British Medical Journal. So the name of the study was Association Between Changes in Carbohydrate Intake and Long-Term Weight Changes, a prospective cohort study. So this was not a study, a research study taking a group and imposing an intervention. What it actually was is they took data from other studies, and these studies were done in like 1986, 1989, and 1991. So late 80s, early 90s is when all of these studies were done. They took all of the data and then compiled it to make some inferences from it. There's some power here because one, you can get a lot of data and you can affect and look at the effects on a lot more subjects than like 302. So the number of total participants that they looked at, their data was 136,432. And all of these were people from within the US. These were US participants. The average age of the participants in these different studies they looked at was 50. And it was predominantly more women than it was male. It's 83% women. Here again, there was no chronic disease at baseline. And these studies, even though they may have not been weight interventions, and actually none of these studies were weight interventions, they were looking at other things. They just happened to collect weight data and nutritional data, which was helpful for this paper down the road. But none of these people had chronic conditions at the time that they were in the study. What they looked at was a 4-year period and a 4-year change in weight. Now remember, these people were not given a dietary intervention. They were not trying to lose weight. They just got data, general out there living, what people were eating, what their change was in weight. And what they found is that everyone over the course of 4 years gained weight. And I would say that's pretty fair. When you look at the general population, most of the time there's a couple of pounds of weight gain every year, sometimes more, sometimes a little less, but overall people's weight doesn't stay the same from 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s. Generally they gain weight. And they said, yes, they saw that as well, that the general trend was for weight gain. And once again, this was not an intervention. They were just looking at people's dietary pattern that they were eating during this 4-year time. What they found is that limiting low quality carbohydrates, and these are things like added sugars, sugar sweetened beverages, so think like juices, sodas, energy drinks, Gatorade's actually got more sugar than soda does. Refined grains, so think your breads, crackers, pastas, things that are very much refined, and the higher starchy veggies, so like the potatoes. Limiting those low quality carbohydrates showed less weight gain. So they still gained weight, but the people who intentionally limited those in their diet, maybe they didn't remove them all the way, but they intentionally limited those, had less weight gain over 4 years. The people that had diets that had higher intake of sugars, sugar sweetened beverages, refined carbohydrates, and starchy vegetables gained more weight. So what that tells me as a weight management person or healthcare provider, I should call myself a healthcare provider, if an individual loses weight on low carb and does really successful, and then they continue those principles long term over the next 4, 10, 15, 20, however many more years they have left on this earth, that they have a better chance at maintaining that weight loss long term. And I see that in myself. I've been very open with everyone that I have struggled on and off with obesity since a very young age. About the age of 5 is when it really started to become a big issue for me, or I can remember it being an issue. I did low calorie diets on and off throughout my teenage years, throughout my 20s. And then in my 30s, I found the low carb way of eating, and I finally got off that yo-yo roller coaster. The way I teach, the way I encourage people to eat is the way I've eaten for 12 years. And it's the way that I've maintained my weight for 12 years. Is it always perfect? No. Do I still have a little bit of ups and downs? Absolutely. Have I hit that golden weight? A couple of times in those 12 years, but I have stayed very, very consistent in a small, I would say 5 to 10 poundish range, depending on what's going on in my life over 12 years. And I know that you can do that too. So if you've not tried a low carb diet, and you have weight to lose, I highly recommend it. If you are actively doing a low carb diet and you're being successful, I highly recommend you continue doing it because the research shows us that is going to help you in the long run. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this synopsis of the 2 studies. I welcome your comments and we'll try to respond to as many of them as I can. You guys take care and stay healthy over the next couple weeks moving into the holidays.